Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fapstinence Podcast, where we find freedom from porn. As always, I'm joined here by Peter Kirsting. Today, what we're going to be talking about is, let me just actually recap a little bit first about last episode. So last episode, I gave you guys kind of a rundown of my why I do what I do. And in doing so, I talked about a kind of an allegory, a meditative practice that I like to do to really help me get through those tough times and really help me dive into my why. And what we're going to be talking about today is, just recapping that a little bit and how that relates to Peter's story. Just a little bit of a rundown of what we talked about last podcast is you have a certain mountain that you're looking toward, and you're traveling down that mountain through a road, and you're going to have all these temptations and roadblocks along the way that kind of prevent you from getting to that top of the mountain. All right, so to further explain this kind of allegory, we're going to talk about Peter's story here today. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that before we get into that for you?
Yeah, Kevin. So I just want to say that, there's something powerful about the idea of a mountain, the allegory of a mountain, because imagery I think it's really relatable to people, and that everything in life that you are really proud of takes effort. And I think if you're on this journey, we want to commend you, first of all, for trying to undertake something like this, because it's not easy. It's not easy to admit that this is something you need to deal with in your life. And it certainly doesn't, it's not an easy thing to fix. Otherwise, you wouldn't be coming to us or going to other resources to try to figure out a way to get through it. And I think the real good news is that it's not something you have to do alone. In fact, if you believe that you need to fight your porn addiction alone, you're doing it the hard way. But with that in mind, I think the allegory of the mountain, what I always think of, Kevin, especially when you shared your story, was just the idea of the stages of the journey. And when you're undertaking a long, arduous trip, there's going to be moments where you need to stop, take a break, kind of realign, look at your compass, figure out where you're going, right? It's not always going to be super obvious to know where to go, what you need to do. And also, there's going to be times when you have a setback, whatever that might be. You slide down, there's a mudslide, or, an avalanche knocks you back, or, the weather creeps in and you have to stop. And so I think that analogy of the mountain is great, because the peak is really, that's what we want. We can see it's there. But in order to want to get to that point, if it's so hard to get there, you have to have really solid reasons why you want to fight that uphill battle. And I believe, regardless of whether you're a religious person or not, there's something practical in this element. And I think for myself as a religious person, I also find it incredibly apropos, because it's, whether you see it as transcendence or your legacy or an afterlife, there's something you're searching for that's more meaningful than yourself, that's going to help you stay rooted in your convictions. If you're going to succeed, you need to have something like that. Yeah, that's a pretty heavy question. I don't know if I could say there's one moment just on its own, but there definitely are defining moments. And for me, one of the ones I can think of very clearly was a moment I met a group of guys who were openly talking about porn, but not in a societal way of talking about what they watch, or joking about it in that sense, but in actually opening up to each other, being vulnerable and saying, hey, this is something that I don't want to be part of my life, but that I'm having trouble getting rid of. And that was really an eye-opening conversation to be part of. It was something that I was not expecting to be part of. But it was really powerful to hear that conversation, because there's some really common themes that I really felt I resonated with, and some of those were uh, a feeling of shame that this is something I didn't want to share with other people, that this is something that I dealt with on that level. But even before that, it was like really a wake up call to say, well, wait, if these guys are saying that this is something that's a problem for them because they do it on a daily basis, I've never even thought of it like that. But I was a daily porn user at points in my life, and that was one of the first moments I think I thought about it as if like, has the last 13 years been a bit of a binge? Has this been like a big deal that I just never really thought about? The idea of stopping had never occurred to me. It was something that I always felt guilty about, but it was nothing I ever considered like maybe I should stop. It was more like maybe I should hide it better. Maybe I should keep it more private. And I think the more you keep something like that behind closed doors, the more it kind of festers, and it affects your relationships and everything else. And so I guess that moment of raw vulnerability that these men had with each other, that they didn't know each other well. It was kind of it was a moment that I said, whoa, maybe this is something that I should try to cut out of my life. And it was one of the first moments that I try to think of reasons to quit.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's really cool because it's like, I have a similar story in the sense of I'd never even heard of people. It wasn't even like I didn't even register it as a problem. And then just hearing other people talking about it kind of inspired me to start looking into it. So it's really cool to see, because that's what we're really trying to do here with this podcast as well, is to inspire you guys to start taking action. First of all, just even identifying that this might be an issue in your life, and then giving you practical advice on how to, how to really quit this habit. And so much of that really does just come down to your why, of why you even want to actually quit this in the first place, because that's going to be the thing that you're always going to come back down to.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key things, Peter, that have kind of kept you grounded throughout this process in terms of quitting porn and then adopting kind of the Fapstinence lifestyle?
Yeah, well, Kevin, one of the things we talked about in the previous episode was establishing your why, but I think something to consider is maybe you have more than one. At least I know that I do. And in fact, I think in any endeavor you undertake where you're trying to better yourself, there's going to be superficial level reasons, and there's going to be maybe stronger and deeper motivations for why you do something. And so I was thinking about that, and you know, I'm the kind of person, I'm always trying to find a way to be a better person. I want to be a better brother, a better son, a better uncle, a better boyfriend. Just the idea of becoming a more well-rounded human being as I go is important to me. And in order to do that, I think it's important to establish your why for those things as well. And so this exercise is very applicable to any aspect of your life where you're trying to better yourself. And so I guess the first thing I needed to do was say, when I had that open conversation, I saw other people were on the same mountainside. I thought I was the only person. It felt like I was the only person on the mountain, because it was so private. I didn't, my experience was so unique to me, because I never talked to anybody about it, that it was like almost like if you're on a hike and all of a sudden you're like, take a break and you look behind you and there's a bunch of people and you're like, well, this is a good trail to be on because there's a bunch of other people on it too. And there was just something kind of reinvigorating about that aspect of it, that you're not alone. But I think the things that keep me grounded definitely was the idea that the top of the mountain is this place that I wanted to be, in the sense that that's at the end of my life. I want to be able to say that I did the right things. And so I guess one of the things that made me really want to stop watching porn was thinking about how it wasn't just affecting me. Because I think before I had people that I could talk to and have an honest, open conversation about quitting porn, I always just I thought about what it was doing for me, but not what it was doing for to other people or for my relationships with other people. And the more that I've been on this journey, the closer I've gotten to the mountaintop, the more I've realized that porn is harmful on so many different levels. It's harmful to your self-confidence, your self-image, your ability to relate to other people in a other-centered sort of way. Um, and also for the people who are in the porn industry, it's very clear to me, the more research I do, the more I'm convinced that the porn industry is deeply rooted in cyclical way with sex trafficking and things like that. And so I guess one of the things that kept me really grounded, Kevin, was the idea that when I'm watching porn, I'm not only damaging my own ability to see myself and positive light, but I'm actually perpetuating a very harmful environment for others.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, because it's really easy to kind of make excuses for yourself. But then, when you know that other people depend on you, or you're kind of perpetuating a negative cycle, such as like the girls especially that are kind of abused in the porn industry, that can be a really powerful why. But another powerful way to look at it as well is like, think about how important you are to the people that are close to you in your life. Well,
Yeah.
if you're constantly porn addicted, they're not getting the best version of you either. So you're not doing it just for
Right.
yourself. You're doing it to help enhance the experience of the people around you, so that you understand and you know that your best self is going to be there when you interact with them. Because we know this to be true. If you're living, orgasm to orgasm through porn, you're basically not being your best self. You're just kind of recharging for the time for you to go fap again, if your addiction really is that bad. So there is so much more at stake than just from with yourself. So if that's a powerful enough why for you, that's really great. Now let me ask you this, Peter, because you talked about all these different things, and we talked about how, when it comes to, we're all on kind of the similar journey, on the same journey, I should say, but that journey can take different forms in the way in which we go about it. So, I have my meditation of how I do it. What does your meditation kind of look like in terms of, when you're tempted, all those types of things? What does that look like for you?
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about quite a bit recently, because for the greater part of the last year and a half or two, it hasn't been much of a struggle for me, thankfully. Because the more removed you are from your dependency chemically, the easier it is to stay convicted, especially because you're noticing how quickly you're moving up the mountain. But there are moments, there are still moments, whether it's because of stress or hunger or, some kind of rough situation that happened, that I have to be vigilant and aware of how I'm feeling. And I think that's one of the things about this journey, that this might be a little tangential, but I think one of the most rewarding aspects of me deciding to quit porn was how much it required me to get to know myself better. But with that in mind, I think a lot of it looks like there's two things that come to mind. One is, I find the imagery of chains to be very, very powerful. And I see this, I almost imagine that there's a cinder block, the chain to this phone, and that this phone and the cinder block are chained to me, and this is porn. And the idea that I am literally slave to this device, to this feeling, to this experience, and that it's not anything more than a momentary satisfaction. So that imagery of chains, of literal slavery, is really powerful to me, and to think that in being enslaved to that, I'm not able to live the life that I want to live. So that's one of my really deep, I guess, almost meditative images that I always come back to, is like, I don't want to be a slave. I don't want something to be so big a part of my life that it becomes part of my routine, even though I don't want it to be part of my routine. But the deeper thing for me, I guess, one of my deeper whys is my faith, because I do believe strongly that every action that I take in this life affects others, and it also affects my legacy. And it's important to do the right thing whether or not anybody else is watching. And so I feel like that's something that keeps me grounded. It keeps my life structured. But it's not like I'm religious and therefore I'm anti-porn. I'm anti-porn. I don't think the two are they're mutually exclusive. They don't have to be attached. But thankfully, I guess I was more open to that idea because of the fact that I have a faith life. And I think whatever that looks like to you, it's prayer for me, and humility that comes from that, to say, this is something that I am struggling with and I don't want it, and I want someone's help. I don't want to do it by myself. I want help.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Whether, it comes in the form of meditation or prayer, and the two kind of are similar to one another. You could argue that, prayer is a form of meditation, or vice versa. Meditation is a form of prayer, right? It's very, very powerful to just understand that you aren't on this journey alone, that, you are the awareness behind your feelings, and your feelings aren't just you, right? And doing that through meditation, doing that through prayer is so powerful.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any more to add to that, Peter?
Just the one thing I'd say is, one of the most freeing elements. We talk about freedom from porn, right? That imagery of breaking the chains. I think one of those for me is, I am not my porn addiction. That is not, it doesn't define me. And so if you're struggling with something, this for me for a very long time was a source of shame. It made me, I felt guilty. I felt bad. In fact, when I'd relapse, I would feel like, I can't believe I just did that. I should have been stronger. So anyway, I guess a big part of that is just letting go of that shame. And I think opening up to others and realizing that you're not alone on this road. In fact, there's a lot of other people who are trying to do the same thing. It's worth doing. And whatever your why is, you just got to go up there and go for it, but don't do it alone. And I think you can see from Kevin's story, and from mine, that it's going to be different. What your why is going to be different than it is for me, than it is for Kevin. And we just want you out here on the road with us. And I guess that's a good place for us to end this episode, and invite you to join us next time as we talk about kind of leading you down that path of finding your why, and why that is so important. Thank you for joining us on the Fapstinence Podcast, and we hope to see you guys next time.
Later.